Now that we've established what the chemical evolution was and what it entails in those four requirements, we can finally start looking at the actual formation of life. Specifically, we're going to start our journey of life and its formation by looking at what are entitled small organic molecule formation. This is our first starting point, and from here we're going to build life and life's complexity. So the most basic way to understand this is by looking at a simple yet very important hypothesis that two scientists had. It's called the Oparin-Haldane, two separate scientists, Oparin and Haldane hypothesis. And this hypothesis was developed around the 1920s. Just to give you a perspective of time. So it's about in the 20s. So these two scientists came up with this hypothesis, and we'll write down the hypothesis over here. The hypothesis states that the conditions of early Earth, these conditions of early Earth that we talked about briefly in our previous video, and favored spontaneous. There's that word again. This is a very important word when we're talking about the origin of life. Spontaneous organic molecule formation. Molecule formation. So this is a bit of a wordy definition. It's the conditions of early Earth favored spontaneous organic molecule formation. What does this mean? This basically means that if we look at an area of the Earth, specifically near the Earth's surface, we expect to see life being formed. We expect to see organic molecule formation because of the craziness that was happening. Remember how we said the Earth was full of that energy with lightning storms and thunderstorms and meteorites and volcanoes. All these things are happening. These are eventually going to be something that are going to favor the spontaneous formation, the random formation of things like sugars, things like amino acids, lipids, even nucleic acids. All these things are going to be formed because of the conditions of early Earth. That's our hypothesis. So let's figure out if it's right or not. Let's test it. And how are we going to test it? We're going to jump ahead to the 1950s. Let me just see how much room we need. We need to put this right about, let's say, here. So our hypothesis now is going to be tested. As any good scientist will do, they'll test these hypotheses. So we'll test our hypothesis. It's tested by two specific scientists, by Miller and Urey, and they do their test in the 50s. So about 30 years later, we have two scientists say, all right, let's see if they're right. Let's try to figure out a way to develop some sort of test so that we can check the Oparin-Haldane hypothesis. Their hypothesis is a pretty bold one, right? It's stating that life randomly formed because of the conditions of Earth. So let's see if we can do that. So Miller and Urey, they decided to try and recreate this. What they did was they created a closed system. What that basically means is that they created, let's say, imagine a big sort of room, and they closed that room to the exterior, just focused on the room itself. The room is independent of everything. The room itself, the box, that room that they used, represented Earth entirely. So they created a closed system to simulate. What do you think they're simulating? What do they want to show happening? The early Earth's conditions. So we'll write that down. Early Earth conditions. COND, conditions. What did they do? They made sure that this area had tons of methane. They made sure that this area had some water vapor within it. They made sure that the area had some ammonia. They made sure that it had hydrogen. And they obviously also made sure that there was an electrode. What's the electrode doing there? Remember how we said the chemical evolution required a source of energy in addition to these organic chemical compounds? This electrode provides us a nice spark. Energy spark. Because remember, there was tons of energy in this early Earth from those lightning storms and thunderstorms and meteorites and volcanoes. All those things provided energy. So what happened next? Miller and Urey set this up. They did the experiment. and then they observed things. Remember, the scientific process was all about thinking of a problem, creating a sort of solution to that problem, creating a hypothesis, a proposed explanation, and then observing and collecting data. And what did they do? They examined the formed compounds. They looked at what happened. They actually formed some things. Examined formed compounds. What did they find? What did this environment promote? This environment actually promoted the creation of amino acids originally. And they also saw other organic compounds that we'll talk about in just a second. So we'll write that down, other organic compounds. So it's fair to say that they were successful. They were able to create life, a part of life from non-living things. Amino acids are an essential part of life. They were able to create it by simulating this early Earth environment. So what happened later? Later on, what happened was that, as any good scientist would do, they repeated their experiment many times. So the experiment was repeated over and over. Experiment is repeated. They get the same results. But in terms of same results, that basically means that they get more organic compounds. They eventually were able to reproduce all 20 amino acids. They were able to reproduce all known nucleic acids, Na. They were able to produce lipids. They were even able to produce sugars. All of these things came from non-living system full of methane and crazy hydrogen and ammonia and electrode. All this environment, this crazy early Earth environment, was simulated, formed some compounds, repeated, formed the rest of the compounds. We kind of confirm, and also I forgot to mention ATP, which is an energy molecule, synonymous for life, basically, was also formed. All of these things helped confirm the Oparin-Haldane hypothesis. Oftentimes you'll see a question asking, what did Miller and Urey do? In short, they were able to confirm the Oparin-Haldane hypothesis by creating and simulating an early Earth environment and getting the results that Oparin and Haldane predicted would happen. So, overall, the Oparin-Haldane hypothesis can be summarized by stating that it was a hypothesis that actually suggested that, and this is sort of an extra part of this information, that organic molecules, in addition to being formed spontaneously in the early Earth environment, they actually accumulated in oceans. So we'll write that down. Accumulated in oceans. This is now also commonly referred to as the idea of sea of organic soup. That's how life started. It started as a sea of organic soup. And one final way to describe this, and you'll often hear this, is this probiotic, pro meaning first, biotic, or pro meaning early or first, and biotic refers to life, pro-life soup hypothesis. That's what Oparin and Haldane did, and guess what Miller and Urey did? They confirmed the probiotic soup hypothesis. And to close off this video, there are other hypotheses to explain small organic molecule formation. There's one more alternative hypothesis you should just have a general idea about. So there's an alternative hypothesis that we'll draw off to the side here. This alternative hypothesis stated that life actually formed at the ocean floor as opposed to near the Earth's surface. So life formed at ocean floor. Specifically, this one was at the ocean floor cracks. And why was this a good environment for life in this hypothesis? There were these things called hydrothermal vents. And these had very sort of similar, let's say, environment to the crazy Earth that we observed earlier in the Oparin-Haldane hypothesis. But more specifically, people believe in this hypothesis because hydrothermal vents are protected from something. There's actually no meteors. There's no volcanoes here. There's no craziness that's happening at the hydrothermal vents. All that's here are things that help promote life, like water, of course, carbon monoxide, different minerals were also seen. So this is just another way of thinking of life formation. But the one that you should definitely have a good idea of is the Oparin-Haldane hypothesis, and understand that their hypothesis was also considered the probiotic soup hypothesis, and it was eventually confirmed and then reconfirmed by Miller and Urey through their experiments in the 1950s, recreating and resimulating an Earth environment similar to the one that they stated in their hypothesis.